Call the meeting to order for June 23rd, 2016. First item on the agenda is consideration or approval of our minutes from the June 9th committee meeting. Any commissioner have any comments or corrections or anything to the minutes? If not, they will be considered passed as written. Next item is our financial statement. Chair recognizes Mr. Rook.
Thank you. This is financial summaries for revenue and expenditure for the City of Hayes, month ended May 31. Revenues in May totaled $1,765,465. That's an increase of about $19,000. Revenues, water and sewer revenue were up about 2.88 and 29.74% respectively, or a combined $55,000 as compared to May and 15, despite water consumption being down 9.6%. Given that drop in consumption, the conservation tier revenue fell 25% during that same period. Year-to-date, water consumption is down 6%, while total revenue, water revenue is up 5 3/4, and sewer revenue up 30. Like on revenue decreases, insurance refunds for employee benefit fund fell $19,684 for the workers' compensation estimate adjustment. This refund came in April of 16 as opposed to May a year ago. And building permits and general government revenues are off $13,500 year-to-date. And year-to-date, building permits revenue is down $7,158. Expenditures in May totaled $1,572,461. That's a decrease of $845,000. Some areas of increased expenditure: airport improvement expenditures were up $14,500 for some additional work to the Crosswind runway. Finance professional services rose $25,685. That's simply due to the timing of a partial payment for work on the 2015 audit. General supplies and materials increased $9,100 in stormwater management for the purchase of concrete for improvements in the alleyways on Ida Lane and Canterbury. Some areas of decreased expenditures. As reported last month, the headline for decreased expenditure for May was a third payroll. Therefore, all funds saw a decrease in that line, as one extra payroll amounts to about $373,000. And also contributing to the significant decrease noted is the transfer from Commissioner Capital Reserve for the Commission-approved early retirement of bond series 2003A at this time last year. That transfer was $449,000. Month-to-date general fund sales tax collections were at $611,927. That is an increase of $11,689 as compared to last year. That ends a 4-month slide in sales tax. 8 of the last 12 months experienced a notable decrease in sales tax receipts. Year-to-date, general fund collections are at $2,963,002. That's down $117,404 year-to-date, or a negative 3.81 as compared to this time last year. The reported quarter-to-date sales tax collections by industry classification was down $13,169, or 0.78%. Those top 10 represent 70% of the total quarter-to-date sales tax distribution. And the Finance City Clerk's Office invested $2.6 million in maturing or renewing certificates with a weighted average interest rate of 0.66. The portfolio of certificates of deposit on May 31 totaled $55.7 million with a weighted average interest rate of 0.49. Worth noting, that rate is up 26 basis points from a year ago. Total balance of the money market account on May 31 was $1 million with a current yield of 0.2. And total investments were up $1.3 million when compared to this time last year.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the May 2016 financial statement as presented.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Schwaller, second by Commissioner Musel for approval of the financial statement. I think obviously everybody sat up when they heard we finally had an increase in sales tax. That's good news. Hopefully that trend continues. Does any commissioner have any questions of Mr. Rook?
I'm just curious, Kim, and you may or may not be able to answer it because I'm asking about just stuff that I've read in the news, but you know, the county is having problems with their part of the sales tax covering the bonds for the courthouse and the EMS building. And what I saw quoted is saying that their sales tax revenues are down 10% over the past 2 years. But as I'm looking at page 9 of the financial statement, it looks like, I mean, yes, this year we've had several, you know, we're down 3 point whatever it was percent, but it's not 10%. And as I look back through the past years, we look, I mean, flat, if anything, maybe a little up. How do you reconcile that? Is that?
County's going to be more than just Hayes. to the county. It's
Right,
more
so,
than just
I mean, does that just mean that outside the city limits, that
doing a little work.
sales are really just down that bad
Doing a little
outside the
work.
city limits? Okay.
Particularly when you weight that in.
And with the water and sewer revenue, that's, would be with the rate increase that we had on the water and sewer.
If you remember correctly, the sewer, it was around September, October of 15 that we did an increase, and then we did another increase on sewer on January 1. Water was one increase on January 1, 16.
If you haven't noticed that, you're not paying your bill.
No, I hadn't noticed
Because
that.
it's
My
really
question,
insignificant.
yeah, my question is with the increase, though, we're able to speed up our infrastructure replacement.
We should be able to. It's pretty much on track of what we thought where we'd be, even with the dip in the consumption. We should be able to budget, the way we're looking at projecting 16 and budgeting for 17, we should be able to put away what we thought we could.
And you'll see that in the 2017 budget when it's presented. The capital improvement plan will have a lot more projects year after year after year, because now we know we should have the revenue to cover those.
Okay, thank you.
And remember also on the sewer, we took a larger increase there because we're also preparing to take care of that debt.
The debt, right. Right, I understand.
Very good.
Thank you.
Further comments? Call for the vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Motion carries 4-0. Next is citizen comments. Any citizen in the audience that would like to address the commission, you may do so now. Please state your name for the record. Seeing none, we will move on to the consent agenda. If you look this over, you'll see that I have a couple reappointments to the Airport Advisory, and then a new member's been appointed to the Golf Course, Sharon Honeyman, appointed a 3-year term.
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
I second.
Motion and a second for approval of the consent agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0. We will move on then to new business, the commercial insurance renewal for 2016-2017. Mr. Rupp, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Commissioners. Kim Rupp, Director of Finance. City's commercial insurance package will expire on July 1, 16. Requested package quotes from 7 carriers by Arthur J. Gallagher, the city's insurance broker, resulted in only one responsive and responsible bid from the incumbent in the amount of $196,220. The outcome translates into a 4.9% increase, or a $9,000 more than the prior period. At last week's work session, Christina Pyle, our rep with Arthur J. Gallagher, explained that they did go out to market this year for the insurance renewal, as it hadn't happened in a couple of years. She mentioned they wanted to make sure they were doing due diligence to be sure they were getting the most effective pricing for the city. Arthur J. Gallagher has negotiated extremely competitive renewal pricing in the last 2 years and has kept rates flat, some lines of coverage experiencing rate decreases. Due to a few challenging claims, along with an increase in exposures, some of the lines of coverage have experienced a premium increase, while other lines of coverage received a premium decrease. Our broker also informed us that there is limited competition among insurers in the state at the city's current rate and deductible levels, which are very competitive. So based on today's market, we see that this is a very competitive renewal. Sorry. Breaking down these lines of coverage a little further, just real quick. Property and scheduled equipment exposures for buildings increased 1% over the prior year. The auto count increased by 3% and the equipment value stayed flat. The premium increase is mostly driven by the increase in values and auto count. There were no changes in terms or conditions. On equipment breakdown, the premium increased slightly by 1% to account for the 1% increase in building values and no changes in terms or conditions. Excuse me. Crime, there were no changes there. General liability, no changes. Public entity management liability, no changes. Law enforcement liability, Class A employees, such as the police officers and et cetera, increased by 6%. No changes in terms or conditions there. Employment-related practices, there were no changes in terms or conditions. Airport liability, last year Arthur J. Gallagher negotiated a 30% reduction, which equates to about a $1,200 savings in premium. For the 16 insurance renewal, Arthur J. Gallagher negotiated an additional 15% reduction, which equates to $395 in premium savings. Commercial auto, no change in terms. Premium increased slightly due to increase in auto count in the current insurance marketplace. Umbrella, no changes in conditions or terms. Premium increased slightly to account for underlying exposure increases, auto, law enforcement liability, et cetera. Public entity cyber liability, Arthur J. Gallagher moved this coverage from AIG to BCS Insurance for the renewal. Arthur J. Gallagher is a program through BCS that provides very competitive rates and broad coverage. Gallagher negotiated a 34% reduction, which equates to $5,000 in premium savings. This is one area of the insurance market where increases are common due to the large amount of data breaches that are occurring each day, and such a large reduction is very notable in this marketplace. So tonight, we ask that you authorize the city manager to renew the 16-17 insurance coverages with the incumbent insurers for the $196,220 premium to be funded from the intergovernmental insurance and surety line item.
I'd move that we authorize the city manager to renew the 16-17 insurance coverages with the incumbent insurers for $196,220 to be funded from the intergovernmental insurance and surety line item.
Second?
Motion by Commissioner Myers, seconded by Commissioner Musel. You ever seen that before where you had, I can see where you maybe only have one person bid on or something. Have you ever seen where you get 7?
I haven't seen it less than 2 on insurance.
What's that?
I have not seen it less than 2 on insurance. She explained last week
I got
that,
to think about that during the week there. I thought that was kind of amazing that not one of the others even submitted a bid. I realize put a bid together like that takes a lot of time, and
I think, to explain it a little, is right here. I think Britt was hungry 2 years ago when we first went with them, and so they are trying to recoup a little on that now, but they price themselves very well, and I think the market still, can't catch up with them. So I think it goes back to 2 years ago when they were much lower than most everyone else. And
Remember too, I'm involved in a lot in these various claims and so forth, so I kind of pay attention to this. This is a situation where the insurance company all these insurance companies full well know what premium you're already paying, so it's not a pure bid situation like it is on some of your equipment and things like that. It's not just a situation where we have X amount budgeted and they know that they've got to come in somewhere close to that. And this one, all those companies knew exactly what Britt had charged us.
Yeah.
And so they knew what they were faced
you
with.
said last week they were very transparent.
Yeah, and I think a lot of them just said, we're not going to spend the money to prepare a bid that we can't beat
Can't beat.
what you're getting already.
I'll further restate what I said last week, in that when our home premium went up significantly, so I started shopping around and I called 4 different
Yeah.
agencies, and I had one that literally called and just left a message and said, because I shared with all of them what our current premiums were, and one Farm Bureau called and just said, we're not even going to quote you because we're not going to be competitive. And so there was actually only one agency that actually gave me a hard number quote out of the 4 that I contacted. So, and that's just with regular old homeowners and auto policies. So I can't imagine that this would be any different. Not to mention that as I'm looking at the numbers, if you look at 12, 13 versus this year, just looking at sheer numbers, that means 1, 2, 3, over 4 years, we've seen a 2.3% increase over 4 years. It's hard to complain about that.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. It's good for us.
comments? I'll call for the vote. All in favor of approval of the commercial insurance renewal for 2016 and 17, authorizing the city manager to renew said insurance policy, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The motion does carry 4-0.
Thank you.
Next, we have water conservation update. Appears that we're going to hear from Mr. Regal.
Good evening, Commissioners.
Evening.
Jason Regal, Water Conservation Specialist. Here to just provide a quick update on how our incentive programs are going for 2016. Kind of want to focus on turf conversions. That's what I've been busy doing with this summer, so we'll get started. Toilet rebates, this is a well-participated-in program, has been since it was revamped 2 years ago. We're seeing a lot of action from, it seemed like before we were seeing a lot of DIY action. A lot of homeowners would go to a retailer and buy one. We're seeing a lot of plumbers now starting taking advantage of this, using it as a selling point, which is really good to see. And on a lot of these slides, you'll see amount of money saved as compared to a new source. I know most of you are probably familiar, but when we're trying to determine the efficacy of these programs and whether or not they're worth it or not, we use $30,000 per acre foot, which is kind of the agreed upon number that it would take to pipe another acre foot of water to our system. But you can see 81 rebates, 200 estimated by the end of the year. That's on par with what we had done in the prior 2 years. Urinal rebates. This is the bad news. Big old goose egg, 0, and I don't know why. This year we started a $50 bounty to local plumbers. If they bring me an old urinal, I'll give them $50. And I thought that might spur some people to look into it, but it hasn't yet. I think it's a sheer numbers game at this point. People are, you look at the amount of residential homes in town compared to the amount of businesses. I think it's strictly a numbers game at this point. Each year we've had this, we've done less than 20. So I'm kind of debating whether to ask for those funds to be allocated somewhere else, and we can be more aggressive in another program.
Do you think on that, the cost of tearing it out, resisting?
It certainly could be that, and it's hard to say.
No, it's not. It's not it at all. You're dealing with large institutions where top management's not involved in this decision. They have no idea what the cost of the urinal is. They have no idea what their water usage is. And the CFO for these organizations isn't even thinking about this. So the 3 organizations that would benefit from it the most and could actually do it, someone would just have to go to the president or the superintendent and say, this is a big deal. You will save a lot of money. And then get around the people in the middle that just don't want to do it.
Yeah.
It's inconvenient.
And we did have a water device inventory for 489 last year or so, and mostly floor urinals. Now that requires
That's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, it's a big tear out. So I think 489, the ones that were easy to replace or not floor, were wall mounted have been changed out. But it's like I say, I think it's a numbers game, and like I say, I might come to you sometime and ask for those funds to be reallocated somewhere else.
But if I could interrupt a second, Jason.
Absolutely.
I will call out the university here, Florida State University. We have reached out to them several times.
They won't respond.
And the response is nothing. And, I've been in a lot of those buildings and checked out the restrooms, and they have a lot of potential to change these out.
Memorial Union is big. Most of them do not have the floor to ceiling, although some of the buildings do. But again, it's getting to the right person in that organization, because the people in the middle just don't want to do it. It's too much work.
But like USD 489, I know there's an expense, but where they're trying to save everything they can, you would think.
With a high volume of users
Oh, yeah.
that the school's going to have, this will make a significant
Well,
impact on their water
I can't
bill.
tell you how many times I've been out there to games or practices, and they're running constantly, and it just makes you sick.
Yeah.
How much does that cost the taxpayers?
Right.
And our urinal rebates are significantly high. Correct me if I'm wrong, but $300 will almost buy you the urinal.
It
Yeah.
will.
Yeah.
So you're paying for the labor to put it in, and then you're realizing the savings right away.
Yep. Clothes washer rebates, popular program's been around for a while. Did make some changes. Energy Star changed their standard, so in turn, the Consortium of Energy Efficiency had to change their standard. So we kind of made some modifications this year to the eligible models, but every Energy Star front loader is eligible. Some top loaders, I know some people are partial to top loaders, some of those are eligible also. But about 5 acre feet, potential for 5 acre feet this year, and pretty good savings. Shower heads, faucet aerators, kind of the same thing. It's on par with what it's been the last few years. Free or $5 with a trade-in. We figure for every 20 or 25 that we distribute, that's about an acre foot. So that's a huge payback on that small investment for those 20 shower heads to reap those benefits. And we're also looking at some new options there too. We want to kind of keep those options fresh. We don't want to keep having the same old stale offerings. Catch for Grass program. Last year, we had 52 participants by the end of the year. This year, we've got 36 so far. I think last year we did about 62 to 63,000 square feet, 51 this year already. Anticipate more people getting in as fall comes on, and they're more willing to tear out some grass. But this is by far our bread and butter. I mean, as far as potential savings go, it's if we could get people with large yards to take advantage of this program, I think, and we've been getting some influx on that this year. It's been going pretty good. Website, HaysUSA.com for all the people tuning in on TV. Check out the website. We're constantly trying to reinvent our web presence, and we've got some stuff on there that people find beneficial. And we're on Facebook now. We'll fill your news feed full of water efficiency information, conservation information, as well as main breaks. If we have a main break and there's an area of town you want to avoid, we try to keep people up on that. But it's a new venture for us. I mean, not a new venture for me, but a new venture for us on Facebook, and trying to see what buttons we can push and get the most likes we can without having to do too much effort.
I like it.
That's all I have, guys.
Yes, I appreciate everything you've been doing on the education program.
Thank you, Eber.
Keeping everybody posted on that. I've heard some good things back from people that have done the conversions,
Yep.
Thought it was a pretty nice process they had to go through, pretty painless. So.
Yeah, it is.
One for me, you go around town and see the people that are converting. I mean, there's some
Mm-hmm.
really nice yards that have converted, and it's not just the rock garden.
Right.
There's a lot of nice.
Yeah, there's a few along that 22nd Street
Yeah.
corridor, quite a few of them actually that are participating this year, which is great to see. Especially those highly visible lots, that have maybe spent years and years and years trying to resod and water and keep cool season grass alive, and finally realized, this I'm fighting nature at this point, and might as well take advantage of a program that's going to help me out financially up front, and then that savings is all money in the pocket in the end. So
Landscapers are getting very creative too, which
Oh, yeah.
is very
They
nice
are.
to see.
Yeah.
They're taking on this challenge and trying to outdo each other.
Yeah, I
Doing
think
a
it's
good job.
I had a lot more people this year asking about it. It's kind of funny how last year, big push, but I think people are starting to see other people have done it.
I think so.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
looks good.
Thank you.
for what you're doing.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Jason. Report to the city manager.
I have a few things, so I will go up front. Toby Doherty, City Manager. First item I would like to update the City Commission on is the U.S. Department of Transportation issued an order yesterday authorizing SkyWest as the next carrier to provide essential air service passenger service to Hayes Regional Airport. SkyWest is the current carrier. The contract is in effect August 1, 2016 through July 31, 2018. Couple items of note here. One, we're extremely happy the Department of Transportation selected SkyWest. They're a good carrier. They have great equipment. They're very reliable. They do a good job. And we've heard nothing but good things from our flying passengers about them. So we're glad to see them retained as the carrier. As we've talked about several times, SkyWest has not met their projections in this contract period, and that is actually reflected in the bid. 2 years ago, their bid for the Hayes to Denver route, 12 flights a week, was $2.2 million. And they estimated 15,000 passengers, a little over 15,000 passengers carried during the 2-year period each year. They're on track to hit 9,500 passengers this year. They were in the 8,000s last year. And so that is reflected in their bid of $3.4 million to fly the same numbers of flights back and forth. The reality is it costs a lot of money to fly a jet between here and Denver twice a day. And so the more passengers they can put on that plane, the less their subsidy is. Just to give you a comparable, Garden City flies the same jet 14 times a day, or 14 times a week between Garden City and Dallas. The flight itself was a little bit longer. There's 2 more flights a week. Their subsidy is $968,000. That's because they're putting more passengers in seats. When American Eagle first came into Garden City, their subsidy request was over $3 million. But because of the passenger load, their subsidy's down below $1 million right now. So the bid of $3.4 million is a reflection of low oil prices right now. If the low oil prices were more in a normalized range, we probably would have seen a bid a lot higher, and I don't know if DOT could have taken it. So, we've talked about this ad nauseum. It would be nice to see more utilization of the airport. We know it's not always going to be the most affordable option. We know it's not going to always be the most convenient option, but in a lot of instances, it is very affordable, it is convenient. And I've said it many times, the ridership does not reflect the level of service we have at this airport. So we have a 2-year window here with a great carrier, with good equipment and reliable, dependable service. And I'm asking the flying public, please check the Hayes Regional Airport before you make accommodations somewhere else. If it doesn't work out for you, fine, but please check the regional airport first. If you have any comments on that before I move on?
I think it's great news that we kept SkyWest. I know we haven't met, where we wanted to be, but they're a great service, and I personally think it's gonna get better. With the oil right now, it may take a while, but I think we got great service. I'm glad we were able to keep them.
So would you say that it's a fair statement that in 2 years, when we're going through this process again, if oil goes up and if our ridership stays the same, that we may not even get a bid from SkyWest?
We may not get a bid, or the bid may be high enough the DOT. If you remember, we had other bids on this.
Right.
Quite a few.
We had Great Lakes bid on our service. Again, I don't think anybody wants to go back to Great Lakes. That's a road we've traveled down, and I don't think anybody wants that. We had another company called Via Air bid on us. Via Air, where they are at, the customers are happy with them, but they aren't a carrier, they're a ride to the airport. So you have to book your trip on Via Air and then go through the process of going to the airport. They're working on getting carrier certification, so in 2 years, they could be a viable option, but their subsidy was also pretty high, too. And so, again, their subsidy was based on how many passengers they think they're going to carry and the price of oil, the price of flying the flights back and forth. Jets are expensive, but operating jets are expensive.
Right.
So if we go 2 years from now with top-notch equipment, a good schedule, and again, United, reliable, and we're still under the 10,000 boarding range, then I don't care who the bidder is, it's going to be high. And so in the Central Air Service program, just for the people at home that don't understand this, when the airlines were deregulated back in the 80s, when the airlines were regulated, the routes were assigned. And so if you were Pan Am, you might get 3 legs between Los Angeles and San Francisco, which is a very high revenue generator. But the federal government would say, oh, you also need to go to Modesto and Fresno and Ely, Nevada, even though those are probably money losers, and they did all with all the airlines. Well, the airlines were deregulated back in the 80s, and when that, or 70s, was it?
Yes,
70s. And when that happened, it was a free market. However, there was legislation passed as part of that deregulation act that said communities receiving air service shall continue to receive air service. And then that's where the subsidy program was created. We were one of those communities. We were a tag-along. That legislation's been modified a couple times through legislation and through regulation, but there are limits outside of Alaska on the amount of subsidy per passenger. So we could reach a point to where the subsidy amount per passenger could get us out of the program.
Because it should be noted that there is a community that is not on this list that was there 2 years ago, and that's Great Bend.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
in the late 90s, there was another community on this list that's no longer there, and that's Goodland.
Goodland. And there's right now, there's 2 ways to be removed from the program. One is proximity to a major airport. And they have expanded that proximity window over the years to remove some communities from being eligible for the program. That's something we don't have to worry about. We do not have proximity to a major airport. Kansas City is no longer classified like Denver is, and so Denver is our major airport, and we're always going to be far enough away. I say always. We should be far enough away. That shouldn't be a problem. But the passenger subsidy could get us at some point if it becomes too high.
Well, the other thing that probably would get us, other than that, would be the fact that, as with all federal legislation, and our Dennis Devaney, who's worked with us for many, many years, actually since the program was created, said that this subsidy was never meant to last forever. And the fact that it has continued since the Carter administration is unusual. However, Congress and the President don't fund it at any greater level each year. It's pretty stable. So that in itself might be the end of the program, because the federal government might use the money for something else.
And Commissioner, you probably know better than me, there's been several attempts to kill the program in the past
Absolutely.
that really haven't made it out of the chamber it originates in, but they've
Right.
tried.
Yeah, exactly.
So does Great Bend not have any air service right now?
I'm not sure what the status of Great Bend Service is. They pulled it a few months ago. They had Seaport,
Right.
and they pulled it. And as Commissioner Meyer pointed out, they aren't on this bid.
Right.
So I'm not
And they-
sure if they're
they bid
completely.
at the same time.
Yes, they typically bid with us. So I'm not sure if they're completely out of the program now, or they are under some sort of evaluation.
Well, and it's also, I think, important to realize what Salina just went through, where they were without service for 3 or 4 months, like we were when SkyWest originally started out, and the legislation has been modified between us being without service and them being without service. They almost didn't get TSA to come back into their airport because that's actually against federal regulations. They had to get senators and representatives and everybody else involved to get TSA back in their airport. So if we were to lose SkyWest for some reason and have some kind of lapse in service, we could be without TSA again. So what's that gonna do to your passenger numbers? I'm glad that SkyWest is there. I just think that we should have a frank and open conversation about the status of the airport and what it could be in 2 years. And I don't think it's so much the public at large, I just think that there are businesses in the area that have communicated with me the importance of the airport and the importance of commercial air service, and it just seems to me that the numbers are not reflecting that those businesses are utilizing that service.
They're refusing
They,
to.
they say well, it's the schedule, it's the price, it's this, it's that, but then in the same breath, they'll tell you how important it is that we have commercial air service, so I just think that it's important that there is a discussion and just a frank conversation of, you cannot on the one hand say that the commercial service is vitally important to your business and to the community, and then on the other hand say, we'll support it when you guys get all these kinks worked out, because one, we have no sway with the federal government whatsoever. We get what we get. And we have no say with a private business and the schedule that they decide to have. That just doesn't happen. And two, if you look at every other EAS community in the entire United States who have what a business would consider a better schedule with an earlier flight, they all have 15,000 plus passengers flying out of there every year. We're never going to get an early morning flight unless people start using it. So it's either use it and try to get to 15,000 passengers so we can get an early morning flight, or don't use it and realize we may not have commercial service. And if we do have commercial service, it's going to be a Great Lakes again. So
You're absolutely correct. And when SkyWest bid this package 2 years ago, they bid a subsidy request of $2.2 million based on a minimum of 15,000 boardings a year. They had the early morning flight because that was one of the perks we had with Great Lakes before, was the early morning flight. They knew that was something that was well utilized and important to us. So for the first 6 months, they kept the early morning flight. We had ridership increase, but not like was experienced in other communities where they replaced 19 passenger turboprops with reliable jet service, where you went from 900 boardings a month to 1,500 boardings the next month to 1,800 boardings after that. I mean, it's just dramatic increases. Garden City, Manhattan, Grand Island, Pueblo, these are all places that had similar situations that went through the roof. We had a very gradual increase. They had a shakeup in the United system, which they have contracts to carry, and they had to make some cuts, and our morning flight was cut. Our morning flight was cut because it didn't respond fast enough. And what they're telling us with this bid is, we can make money at Hayes, but we aren't banking on 15,000 passengers a year again. So you're absolutely right. We get over 15,000, we can talk about the morning flight. The morning flight was great. I love the morning flight. I'm sure you guys that used it love the morning flight. But it doesn't preclude somebody from getting out of Hayes and getting to a lot of destinations right now.
Particularly if you're flying west, it's still very convenient. You could be anywhere on the west coast by 2 in the afternoon and do business. The challenge, and I was copied on an email from one of the 3 large employers, and they were capping the amount of money effectively they were going to spend on tickets. And instead of thinking about, can we still make this work, they said, don't ever look at Hayes, because it's just automatically going to be cheaper to fly from Wichita. $1,000 round trip is a lot of money. You can fly from Hayes pretty much anywhere for $1,000. And so for that major employer to say any new recruits, any employee traveling to a convention, that's pretty bad. And it hurts us a lot. And that's where the traffic comes from. If business professionals are not using it, we're
And
not
that-
going to have a chance.
Yeah, and that's the reason why, I mean, I think that the public, I mean, I can't say for sure, but I mean, if the public is checking, that's great. But at the end of the day, it's the major employers and the people who are saying that this airport is important to them that have the most to lose. And they also seem to be the ones who are not utilizing it the most. So it's this conundrum that, quite frankly, use it, don't use it, it's your choice. I mean, the success of the airport, I guess I just feel like the city, as far as we have done everything we can. I've even privately, I've had conversations with Toby about how do we make this work? How do we get our boardings up? I have personally gone through and looked at multiple EAS, every EAS city in the United States that has jet service, and what are their flight schedules? Which ones are early? Which ones are late? What's the differentiating factor? The ones that are getting the later flights, why are they getting a later flight versus an early flight? There are some cities where they've combined. There were a couple cities in North Dakota where, they have an early morning flight, but it would kind of be like here if like the jet originated in Great Bend, flew to Hayes, and then flew to Denver. It was that kind of a leg. And I've looked at all that, and I'm telling you, 15,000 passengers is what you need to get an early flight. And if you want to keep jet service, you got to have more than the boardings that we have to keep that jet service. And I just keep wondering, what are those communities doing to get those passenger numbers that we're not? Because there's multiple communities I can point to where they had bad passenger numbers, and they got the 15,000 plus passengers with a schedule very similar to what we have. So and I've talked to Toby about, can we look at even combining with Kearney? Can we combine with Kearney and have a flight originate out of Kearney and come to Hayes? And we have been told point blank, the only way we're going to talk to you about an early morning flight is if your passenger numbers are up. Stop talking to us because we're not going to talk about it. So maybe, I just don't know, maybe the business community just doesn't understand that, but we have no cards to play here, and the only way it's going to happen is if people utilize it, so.
Yeah, that's the only card we have is utilization.
But I think the business community does understand it. It's just right now, they're cutting back. I mean, the economy is not the best, and everybody's doing it, and I think it's going to turn around. It's just going to take time, and hopefully we have time with EAS.
Well, we have a 2-year window.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
2
know
years.
a couple businesses in Hayes that fly out here regularly, and they just swear by it. And
That's
they've
great.
adjusted their meetings in St. Louis and so forth to accommodate that. Just a little footnote on EAS. When I was on the commission years ago, it was kind of under attack, if you will. Congress was threatening to cut EAS funding every year, and part of that was it was sort of an abuse situation whereby EAS was designed to kind of provide commercial air service for rural areas, but you had some people in Washington started getting EAS funding for little airports that were 45 minutes away from Washington D.C. and so forth. And I think when they initially started reviewing EAS, it was kind of a deal where you had to prove that it was really essential. And I think when they scrapped some of those, West Virginia and so forth, got rid of some of those destinations, I think it kind of stabilized things for out in this part of the country. Please continue.
Second thing is, I will try to be quick on this. This is about the R9 development process. As you well know, the change applications were filed almost a year ago, and we've been doing the back and forth with Division of Water Resources. Change applications deal with changing the current water rights from irrigation to municipal usage, changing the points where we take the water out of the ground, and then changing the authorized quantity, which is the amount we can pull out of the ground. The last correspondence on this is we received correspondence from the chief engineer that had 5 points he wanted to address before we went further. The first one is consumptive use. That's the amount of water we can we can pull out of the ground, the amount of water that's authorized. We have a little over 8,000 acre feet of water rights at the ranch. When you're converting from irrigation to municipal, you don't get 100% consumptive use, because when you irrigate, some of that water goes back into the aquifer. And so what we're talking about now is the difference between our current water rights and what the water rights would be after conversion. Essentially what we're saying is, DWR, we don't have an issue with your number. Our number is different, but the difference is not enough to argue over right now. So it's a long lawyerly way of saying that. We did point out there was an error in their spreadsheet, which might modify their number, but we didn't change our stipulation that we acknowledge your number. It's not ours, but we aren't going to fight it right now. The issue number 2, justification for proposed municipal use, proposed amount, and project phasing. Typically, DWR uses a 20-year planning horizon when developing a new source of water. They're assuming that the entity developing the new source of water is able to do it in a scalable manner. You develop a source, you look at it for 20 years, you go develop another source. As our water attorney likes to say, Hayes is a great location because we're in the middle of all kinds of places that have good water. You go 100 miles in every direction, there's good water, except for us. So this is a 50 to 75 to longer year solution, and we've asked DWR to think outside of their 20-year boundary, to look at a 50-year plan. We've brought this up because of A, the amount of money we have to invest in the project, B, the fact that we have to get financing for the project, and what we have essentially said to DWR is we can't afford to spend $76 million on a 20-year solution. We're not going to get financing for a $76 million project on a 20-year solution. We need to know that if that water is there as we grow as a community for the entirety of the project. So DWR asked us to put together some methodology. Our attorneys and engineers did that, and we've put it back in their court to say, here's our population projections, here's our methodology, this is what we're looking at. And so we'll just wait to hear back from them. The other thing is flexibility in locating points of diversion. Right now, there's 40-some different spots on the branch where we pull water out of the ground. We're looking to combine that into 12 municipal wells. We didn't want to spend over $250,000 going and drilling samples all over the ranch to find the exact right spots. That being said, the way the regulations typically work is once you identify a point on a map and submit that for that point of diversion, you get 300 feet radius to move it. We've asked for a little bit of flexibility on that by saying we drew a box inside of the ranch. And the reason they have that 300-foot point is because they don't want you encroaching on your neighbors and saying, I'm going to pull it out over here, and then going right up to your property boundary and pull the water out here. So there's a 300-foot point of diversion. What we have said is we're going to draw a box around the inside of the ranch, so we're not even close to our neighbors. We would like flexibility outside of the 300-foot within that box. We're still staying well within our boundaries. We're not encroaching on anybody. DWR come back and said we're a little bit leery of that, and our back in this letter is saying we really don't want to spend $200,000 and delay the project 6 months to do this. We would like that flexibility. It's not hard and fast written in statutes. It's just a regulation they have, a rule of thumb they deal with. And so we'll have to wait and see what their answer is on that. Long-term sustainability. DWR is interested in what they determine as safe yield. We have an authorized rate we can pull out of the ranch, but they're looking at the safe yield. What's the sustainable yield on a year after year after year basis? Burns and McDonnell had an initial safe yield estimate. We've been working on a pretty intensive groundwater model, looking at different runs of rainfalls and runoff and what we pulled out. And what DWR said is we would like to be able to review that, participate. Our response is we have no problem with that. However, safe yield shouldn't be part of this process. It's something that's going to be very important for us as we develop it as a source, but with regard to this legal process, safe yield isn't mentioned in the statutes anywhere in either transfer or change applications. So while you have an interest in that, it shouldn't have any bearing in this process. This is what our attorney is saying back to them. And then the last issue, number 5, DWR has discussed the possibility of having a basin stakeholder group meeting once we've got the change application stuff hammered out. meaning in the Arkansas River Basin, having a public forum essentially for stakeholders to offer their input on the proposed plan. Once we get the details worked out, our response is, it's your show. If you want to have a meeting, fine. You're running the show, we're not, so it's your show, have the meeting. So that's the response. This is in response to the last letter we got from DWR in April that resulted in a meeting from late March. We're expecting probably a pretty quick turnaround because we're getting with smaller and smaller issues here. So I'm hoping to have communication back from DWR within a month, and I'll give you another update when we get that.
Thank you.
Two more issues. I will be very quick. Two county issues. I have met with County Administrator Philip Smith Haynes, and the County Commission brought up two issues that they asked the County Commissioner to visit with me about. The first issue is the extraterritorial jurisdiction the city has for zoning. If counties do not have zoning, cities have the legal authority to go 3 miles outside of their boundaries to enforce zoning laws. If counties do have zoning, counties can either zone up to the city limits, or the two entities can agree on an extraterritorial jurisdiction, of which the city commission and the county commission did several years ago. It's fairly close to 3 miles in most areas, a little under in a couple areas. The county commission brought this up about a month ago at one of their meetings and talked about the possibility of shrinking down the extraterritorial area a little bit. They asked county administrator to meet with me and talk, are there areas that could be cut that don't damage our growth areas, but maybe take some areas out of the extraterritorial area that may be more contentious for us to deal with than really affect our growth areas. So Phil and I met. We've gone back and forth a couple times on some changes. Right now, we have a map. I don't have it to show you yet, but we have a map that we think achieves what the county commission's trying to achieve, but protects our growth areas. And given that this thing is, it's not set in stone, it's changeable. It's something that could be modified down the road. My plan is to take it to the planning commission to get their input for you, and then bring it to you for your input, and then that input will be shared with the county commission going forward. So that'll be on a future work session. I'll be going to the planning commission next month, and then it'll be on I think maybe the first work session in August. The second thing is building codes. At the same meeting where the extraterritorial jurisdiction was discussed, the county commission brought up the idea of building code enforcement outside of the city limits in the county. Currently, the county has no building code regulations. We have the UBC, the Uniform Building Code, we adopt. And then all building that takes place is in conjunction with that code. Permits have to be pulled, inspectors go out, they certify that the whatever was done correctly, and then it gets a certification. The county doesn't have a set of regulations like that. So they were deliberating on the possibility of that, and given that they have a limited amount of construction, the discussion was, well, maybe we could contract with the city to do it, as opposed to us having to hire somebody to do this that may not be that busy. So the county administrator and I discussed it. I talked it over with my staff. We tried to get an idea of how many triggering events there would be in the county. We looked at the 3 mile area and then county-wide. And what we have determined is it is feasible for the county to contract with us. We would have to hire somebody because we don't have the hours just sitting around to do this. So we would have to hire somebody. But there could be some efficiencies for us to hire a part-time position that the county could fund, and then that part-timer could handle some more mundane things, freeing up our inspectors to do other types of inspections. And so there could be some efficiencies gained. It is in the city's best interest if there are building inspections outside of our city limits in our immediate growth areas, because that ensures that structures being built in that area are ready to be annexed in at a future date if the city grows into it. And that is one of the biggest barriers to cities' growth is areas built up that aren't suitable for the city standards when they grow into it. So the message shared with the county administrator is it's feasible. If you want to talk more, you guys need to determine if this is something you're just talking about or if it's something you're ready to commit to do. So he is prepared to talk about it at the county commission level, I believe on Monday, if not this coming Monday, the following Monday. And they're going to determine their interest in actually having building code regulations, adopting a set of regulations.
I think if they're actually committed to doing it and we can work with them, it'd be in our best interest. But we have to have a commitment on their side, and I personally think for the greater good of Ellis County and Hayes, I think it would be good if we could come to an agreement and work with the county and just in future items instead of just always like, well, the city did this, county did this. I mean, to me, to even have that discussion, I personally think is silly. But if they're committed to it and we can come to an agreement, I'd love to see if we could work with them.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion, though.
I will let you know what I hear back from them in the future.
Thank you.
Last item, and I will be quick. Some of you have asked about this, some of you are getting questions about this, so I thought I would give you this opportunity to give you a brief on this. This is the northwest part of town around exit 157. Here's exit 157, the interstate. This would be Intersis, the fairgrounds, Celebration Church. This parcel right here has had a lot of activity on it lately. And I know you guys are getting questions, and you've been asking me questions. This is a zoning map that, again, shows the parcel. There is a little area in this parcel that is zoned, I believe that's I-2. Or is that an 1, Kim?
2.
Okay, it's I-2, which is light industrial. I-1's heavy industrial. This would be light industrial. Or is it backwards? I forget, I apologize. One of them's light, one of them's heavy. But the rest of the property is unzoned, and the rest of the property is unplatted. Right now, it is one contiguous property. This is a Google Earth image from 2013. You can see the property here. This is from 2016. So if you go back, you can see undeveloped, a lot of development going on out here. We have reached out to the property owner in an attempt to contact to facilitate whatever their intent is out there. One is we wanted to let them know that if it is your intent to develop and subdivide, there's a process you need to follow. We have zoning and subdivision regulations that deal with subdividing land, platting it, selling it off, and it has to go through our planning commission at the start, and then ultimately a city commission to do that. So we made the property owner aware that there are regulations to be followed, made him aware of the regulations, the timelines. We also offered our assistance. What is your intent out there? What is your goal? What is your long-term outcomes to this property? Letting the property owner know it's in the city's best interest for them to be successful in developing this property. It's in the county's best interest. And so I have reached out to them, offered to meet with them, with myself, the county administrator, the Coalition for Economic Development director, to talk about their goals, to talk about utilities, roads, plats, whatever their intent to do is. But right now, I'm not really sure what their intent is out there. And so I don't have any more to share with you other than the fact that there is something going on. We've reached out, but we don't have anything back at this time.
Toby, my concern is not just the zoning and platting. Actually, the platting would be the biggest, because if anyone tried to sell a portion of this lot without platting it, that would be fraud.
Correct.
The other matter is that there are no utilities to support any significant development to that property that we are aware of. So they would have to use septic systems, which may or may not be allowed. And while the property is served by a rural water district, the size of the line and the quantity may not be what a development of this size would need. And that's one of the challenges we've had in helping this area develop. We could get water there, but we would need to know that in advance and have some sort of arrangement. So to put the cart before the horse is a bit of a problem here.
The closest sewer line is right here, I believe, behind the KDOT Highway Patrol facility.
Yes, that is correct.
So a very short run, but a kind of an expensive bore. We went through this with the NWK investment proposal. That was right here. That was the Travel Plaza proposal. The nearest water line is right here at Intersis, but it's not feasible for us to move water from here under the interstate because this is the highest point in our system and the furthest away from the pumps and the towers.
You have to have it looped. It's
Yes.
not looped.
And so we would have to bring a line over from 55th Street Tower and then tie back in with this, which also has added benefits. And if you remember the NWK investments proposal, we pointed out that there would be some long-term liabilities for us, but those liabilities outweigh the benefits of looping the system to provide flow and pressure and redundancy and everything else for us. But that would still apply here. Right now, this is in rural water district, Trigo County Rural Water District territory. And so if the proper processes are followed, meaning plating, utilities plans, annexations, things like that, we can serve water to the facility. That's what the NWK Investments was looking at doing. They were looking at doing a proper plating and annexation. They had reached the water district and said, this is going to be our water needs. The water district said, we can't serve that. You're going to use way too much water for that. So therefore, then the city could go in and annex, provide the utilities there. We haven't heard of any of that right now with this parcel. I have been told that the Ellis County Environmental Office has weighed in, and I believe they have a 3-acre minimum for septic systems in the county. You can't put a septic system on less than 3 acres. If I'm wrong, forgive me. But I'm told they weighed in, and there is almost no topsoil in
Correct.
this area out here. And so laterals wouldn't be allowed. It would have to be self-contained holding, which would have to be pumped in periodically if they wanted to go the septic route.
So what are our next steps so that we don't get caught? So what are the city's next steps to reach out so that something doesn't happen and then we get blamed for stopping development? Because given our action within the last month, we are very open to business. We want to help. This sounds like it would be advantageous for us, particularly if we could assist in the looping of the water line. So what are your next steps, Toby?
Communication is the biggest key, and that's what we've tried to do. We've tried numerous occasions now to reach out to the property owner and engage in a conversation. What is your plan? What is your long-term plan? What is your goal for this property? Because if you remember with the NWK investment proposal, there was a TIF district proposed that included this parcel, and this parcel. This is the Peterbilt dealership. And so essentially, any development that happened here, the property tax increase would help pay for the water and sewer and a little bit of the road infrastructure to help serve the district. Therefore, providing an economy of scale to fund those programs. So could something similar be done out here? I don't know if there's still a similar consideration given to developing this corner in a more commercial manner. But is there a funding source here that could provide the necessary water and sewer? But we won't know that unless we engage in any sort of a dialogue with the property owner.
Well, given that it's nearly 4 times the size of the prior concept, I think there would be some taxing ability.
So if this guy or whoever owns it never wants to be annexed into the city, we still have jurisdiction on what he can and can't do?
We have jurisdiction on 2 things, zoning and plating.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay.
So theoretically, the only thing the city commission with the advice of the planning commission has a say on is how the land is platted. And plating takes into account utility access, easements and things like that. So when a plat's put together, where's your stormwater gonna go? Where's your water gonna come from? Where's your sewer gonna go? Or what type of laterals are you gonna have, where's your water, your sewer, your gas, your electricity, things like that. That's all taken into account in plating. As well as transportation issues, where the streets are laid out and how it sets up with the grid. And then the zoning, which says what can be there. Other than that, we don't have any say-so over it. The Peterbilt dealership's a good example. This was zoned commercial. The lot itself was platted. It was a self-contained lot here. So there was no subdividing going on. The person didn't come in and just buy a little corner here. There was no subdividing going on. So the lot itself was platted. It was already zoned commercial. So the property owner could come in and build a commercial business on a septic system served by rural water, and the city had no say-so over that because our regulatory part was complete, plating and zoning, that's all it is.
So with no zoning in place for the large majority of that property, what can you do when there is no zoning in place like that currently?
It's zoned agriculture.
Let me interrupt it. Yeah, it's zoned. It's just the default is agriculture.
Yes.
The default
Right.
is agriculture,
Right.
right? So what can you do with that type of zoning right now?
You can do ag-related activities and you could build a house. But-
And you can sell 5 acres of your agricultural land and not have to subdivide. There's a lot split issue once it's platted, but for right now, somebody who owns a farm or an area out there, if they want to sell 5 acres, they can.
But whoever buys that 5 acres, they,
Then they still have to deal with some of the
right,
other issues.
if they want to do, it's not like you can go buy 5 acres and,
And then just develop it willy-nilly. Then they
Right.
have to go through the subdivision process.
And that was in the code, essentially, if a landowner wanted to sell 5 acres to a child or somebody like that to build a house on, that could be done. It's not meant to circumvent the plating, subdividing process.
And that's just in a 3-mile
Yes,
zone.
yes. So, just a heads up, if you get any more questions, you can let them know this is what's going on.
We have
thank you.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
The commissioners have any comments?
None this evening, thank you.
Thank you.
I do, actually. I just, harvest is in full swing, and we got a lot of activities going on the next week, included the dreaded fireworks that I hear so much about every year. I just hope people were smart. There's since I've been on the commission, it's a no-win situation, whether we have them or not. I think the county did a smart idea, not allowing it out in the county with harvest going on. I think for the safety, that's the best thing to do. But I just hope people actually are able to go out and enjoy July 4th, but also realize that it's very dry out there, harvest is going on, and that's very important to our economy, that those people are successful, and just, no matter what, people aren't going to be happy with people shooting fireworks, but I really hope they take into consideration their neighbors, and if you are shooting them off, obey the law, because this is probably not a fun time for our police officers or firefighters, and I just hope everybody has a happy July 4th.
I hope the agriculture community continues to have a successful harvest. Had a extension board meeting this morning, and the ag agent was giving us a report on some of the yields around here. A lot of 60 bushels per acre, and through the rumor mill, I've heard as high as 80. And I also talked to the wheat scientists at the Ag Research Center in Garden City, who mentioned that they were getting a lot of 60 to 80 yields down in the southwest part of the state. So
That's great.
incredible, except for the prices aren't probably where they like to see them, but nonetheless, I don't believe there's any executive session asked for, so we are adjourned.
It's funny how that works.